This week on Quadriga, election earthquake. Is Merkel to blame? Elation in the ranks of the anti-immigration Alternative for Germany party. Following key elections in 3 federal states, the AfD emerged as a significant new force in German politics. The rise of the AfD has left Germany's political landscape more fragmented than ever. The AfD's election campaign focused on one issue: fierce opposition to Merkel's refugee policy. And the Chancellor's Conservatives took a major drubbing. So after the election earthquake, what's next for Germany? And what's next for Chancellor Merkel? Coming to you live from Berlin, Quadriga, the international talk show. Your host, Peter Craven.
Yes, hello and a very warm welcome indeed to this latest edition of Quadriga, coming to you from the heart of the German capital. And today we're looking at that victory for the anti-immigration AfD, the Alternative for Germany party. And we're asking the question, what impact will that have on German politics? And is Angela Merkel indeed to blame for this surge on the right of the German political spectrum? Now, to tackle those difficult topics, I'm joined here in the studio by 3 excellent guests. Let me introduce them to you without any further ado. Beginning with Derek Scally, who writes for the Irish Times newspaper. He says the AfD is only as strong as Germany's mainstream parties are weak. It is not a danger for now, at least, says Derek. Also with us is Malte Lehming from the Berlin daily The Tagesspiegel. This election outcome is a major blow for Angela Merkel, says Malte. And great too to see Judy Dempsey from the Carnegie Europe think tank. According to Judy, the AfD is challenging Angela Merkel's refugee policies, but the majority of Germans still support the Chancellor. She's nodding. We'll be talking about that, Judy, but let's... What I would like to begin with is this. Most people outside Germany, of course, when they look at Germany, the main thing they think of is a country that has a troubled past, a dark history. So I'd like to begin by asking you how troubled you are about this outcome of the recent elections, 3 state elections, that gave the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, a right-of-centre party, 24%, quarter of the vote in one state, and put them well into double figures in 2 others.
Well, it was inevitable. And there's a section of the society that actually really oppose Chancellor Merkel's refugee policy. And actually, it's not a bad thing that the AfD came through the way they did, because it was through the democratic channels. It wasn't underground, it wasn't out on the streets, it was through democracy. So this is the good thing. The bad thing is that Chancellor Merkel and her party now have to decide which direction they're going to go. Will they pursue the same direction with the risk of actually giving the AfD more support? Remember, there's 3 more elections coming up in the autumn. Or will she actually just continue as business as usual? It's not going to be easy for her.
I'm troubled. I used the word troubled already on the programme. I'm troubled now by you saying business as usual. What about this question? Is the AfD a far-right party?
The AfD has become a home for disgruntled left-wingers and disgruntled right-wingers from the 2 established parties, the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats. This is the first thing. Secondly, before this election, the AfD was a kind of bourgeois Eurosceptic party, but because of all the disputes inside the party, it's kind of mutated into a rather particularly anti-foreign right-wing party, largely because of the new leadership. This is the worry now.
Malte Lehming, is it business as usual, as Judy is sort of seeming to suggest, a bourgeois party, or a party that until recently had bourgeois roots? I mean, you know, one of Germany's leading publications, Spiegel, yeah, just to take them as one example, recently described the AfD as hate preachers, a dangerous new populist party.
It is a populist party, and I would not say it is business as usual. We have the process of fragmentation of the political scape just went on. So most parties don't want to... there is no party that wants to govern with the AfD. So they will be excluded from government. But half of the country is at least saying I'm skeptical or against the refugee policy, which is not represented in the Bundestag, in the parliament. So there is right now no party in the parliament representing half of the country stands towards the refugee problem. And that is one of the explanations why the AfD became only, I have to say, just 12 or 15. It is 24%. That's quite a lot in Sachsen-Anhalt. But that's the ground problem, that so many people don't feel represented. And it first started with the anti-European approach, which is as well something that all established parties are supporting. They are pro-European. So, and we have a lot of Germans' anti-European sentiments as well. So anti-European and anti-refugees or refugee policies is not represented right now. So we have, this is I think, the basic explanation for the success of the AfD.
Judy, you're nodding.
Yeah, it's very interesting, this phenomenon. The AfD, there's a strand of the AfD that actually is saying Merkel's policies, just not her refugee policies, has actually left us behind. Merkel is a moderniser. She shouldn't be leader of the Christian Democrats. She has moved the party to the centre and actually to the left in some ways, and it's left behind the churches, organisations, the old traditional organisations that grew up after the Second World War. And there's a huge constituency out there and say, hey, what has happened to our Christian Democrats?
Right.
Derek, I still want to talk about the AfD and some people, I mean, as I say, I was just quoting Spiegel magazine, view it as a dangerous new populist party. Let's just look at the spectrum of opinion on the right in Germany. We've had the NSU, a terror cell that went on a killing spree for a number of years in Germany, killing migrants here in Germany. We've got the NPD, a far-right party that is being looked at as a possible party that should be banned from German politics by the Constitutional Court. As we speak, we've got Pegida, a street-level right-wing movement, and now we've got the AfD making its mark in German politics. That's a broad array of right-wing opinion in Germany, and troubling for me.
Yes, but most of them are dying, and the AfD is growing, and I think we've seen parties like this come before. We saw the Pirate Party come from nowhere and get double-digit figures. And I think in Germany, the key is not to get elected, it's to get re-elected. And none of these parties have ever gotten re-elected. Most of them die a death quite soon because even the AfD doesn't actually know what it is. We're all fighting, is it a right-wing party? The AfD doesn't know if it's a right-wing party. You've got everything from conservative Christians right over to globalisation critics and economic liberals. We've got professional contrarians. They're fighting over each other. Next month, they're trying to come together with a party programme. So until they've decided that, we don't know what it is. Therefore, it's hard to say.
It's an important point, that, isn't it? They don't...
Maybe we should add, we have two different experiences in Europe. We have the experience that the right-wing parties don't exist very long. That's a German experience. Stadtpartei, NPD, DSU, and so on and so on. They all die down after a certain while. But we have the European experience. Le Pen in France, in Scandinavia, in Hungary, in Austria, and so on and so on. And that tells a very different kind of story, that as soon as you have the combination of anti-European and anti-foreigner sentiments combined, that could be a very strong force. And I'm just not convinced that the AfD will take the German way or the European way. It could be as well the European way.
But it's still to fight for, and at this stage, this party, like in all of the common European experiences, these parties are only as strong as the political mainstream is weak. And the political mainstream in Germany has been complacent. For the last 50 years, they've lain back and said, oh, well, we've taken an anti-extremist antibiotic. It can't happen to us. Well, it has. And the question is, what will the political mainstream do to react against that?
I know Judy's waiting to come in and talk about precisely this point, but let's just listen to what one member of the AfD, he's called Hans-Thomas Tilschneider, from the state of Saxony-Anhalt. He was elected into the local parliament at this vote a couple of days ago. Let's hear what he has to say about the European angle.
Every European country has a party that takes a critical approach to the political establishment. In France, it's the Front National, the FPÖ in Austria, UKIP in Britain, and now we have the AfD in Germany.
Judy, what do you say about that?
It's very complex, so we don't really know. But I ponder about this. And this refugee crisis is so very different from the Euro crisis and the other crises that have confronted the EU. And it's different because it's not about a process. It's not technocratic. It can't be solved by Brussels. It's about people. It's about foreign people who are coming to Europe. And it touches every single person nearly, particularly in Germany, because it's taken in over 1 million. So there's a feeling of the other, there's a feeling of fear, there's a feeling of insecurity on the one hand, there's a feeling of giving of civil society on, yes, we can do it, on the other, Chancellor Merkel's famous mantra. So the two of them, they conflict with each other. But this is why I think this crisis is going to be so difficult for Merkel to handle if she doesn't get a consensus among the other EU countries, because the problem is here to stay. And even if this particular refugee crisis will be dealt with, there'll be more crises hitting us, people crisis.
Yes, I would agree completely. And the problem for Merkel is she's actually created part of this problem herself. She got rid of everyone on the right of the CDU who could have been a competitor to the AfD. They were all rivals to her, so she got rid of them, dumped them overboard. And now we've got a CDU, which is supposedly a Christian Democratic Party. It's actually a Merkel Democratic Union. And the rest of the party are her hostages. And now they have realised, oh, we can't do anything about this. And so she's got rid of her competitors. Her party are bound to her, and they were quite happy to let her go out and win elections for them. So they've created this, and the AfD saw a gap in the market, took it. I mean, that's what political parties do if they want to establish themselves.
I would like to add that the power of Angela Merkel was always based on two levels. The one was the power in her own party, and the other was her power in Europe. Her own party is sometimes an open rebellion against her in the refugee crisis. Look at the CSU, which is the Bavarian part of the CDU, which is an open rebellion to her. And some, even the candidates in some of the countries, went on the open and saying, I'm against her refugee policy. So the power base of her party is eroding, and the power base in Europe is eroding as well. We just had the 12th EU refugee summit, and look at the stance of Europe. So her power to influence things in Europe diminished quite as well. So I think her power is diminished.
I think one new aspect of this is that even if you don't support the AfD, there's a growing disappointment with Europe among the German public, because they don't feel they're getting the solidarity after Germany extended solidarity to all the other EU member states, especially those from Eastern and Central Europe. And there's a lingering Euroscepticism that's not yet coming to the fore. The AfD captures it, but there's a broader one, and Merkel must be very, very aware of this, because there's just, as I said, there's this sense, well, if the others won't help us, who will help us? Maybe we should go our own way. It's very worrying, that aspect.
OK. I'd just like to come back to the AfD once again for the time being, because there are many schools of thought when it comes to sort of assessing what the importance is of this surge from the AfD, a disaster for Germany's international standing, some say, not least members of the business community. But there are others who are arguing that it could be a constructive, or at least a positive shake-up in Germany's political landscape and the way politics are acted out here in Germany. Let's explore that point of view.
Some say that the rise of a right-wing party will not shake Germany to its political foundations. In fact, the traditional parties will be able to sharpen their own profile by dealing with the AfD in Parliament. Finally, we could see some real political debate in Germany, instead of boring speeches. In addition, the rough and tumble of parliamentary sessions will likely expose the AfD's policies as shallow. That's happened before to other right-wing parties in Germany. What's more, 3/4 of the German electorate voted against the AfD. After the AfD's success in those state elections, more and more people will be inclined to vote against them. People will discover that every vote does count, and that will be good for democracy in Germany.
Martin Leming, a positive shake-up for German politics after this vote?
That's a very positive way to express. Would be a very positive way to express it. And it will be very tough to deal with the AfD, considering their strength. The moment is, I mean, if the media or the established party will just go to reflexes like they are nationalist, racist, and blah 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 blah, they will gain strength and not lose strength. So it very much depends on how do you deal with them. So I think Merkel did a big mistake, because you have two different Merkels in the refugee policy. You have the Merkel from the autumn 2015, open arms, open borders, saying we can do that, make selfies with the refugees and so on and so on. And you have the recent Merkel, who changed her policy by strengthening the asylum laws, by openly addressing the refugees. As soon as the war is over, you have to go home, and so on and so on. You have two different sides, and she never explained why she switched from the one side to the other side. So people just got confused by this kind of policy. It's not just against or for the policy, but they just got confused by that.
Merkel's real weakness is her lack of communicating. actually. She communicated before she first became Chancellor in 2005, just about. And then there's some mistakes with so-called tax policy. Leaving that aside, she's rarely communicated how she sees Europe, how she sees Germany, Germany's place. It's not a vision thing, it's a practical hands-on thing. And if you look back at Chancellor Merkel's record, I cannot remember a memorable speech she gave on Europe, let alone Germany. And as for the refugees, it was a unilateral decision. The only person she told was Chancellor Faymann in Austria. She never told the Commission, she never told the Member States. It's as if she learned nothing from her decision in 2011 to get rid of nuclear energy when she told nobody either.
And it gets worse. The impression of her changing policy was she's giving in to the demands of the AfD, because now you're suddenly saying we have to reduce the numbers, we have to control the borders, we have to declare more states as safe havens, and so on and so on. That's what the AfD said from the beginning on.
I think that's a bit
unfair. So the impression is that if you vote for the AfD, you really can change something and force her to change policy.
Let's just take a break for 1 second and then we'll come to Derek, because I'd like to hear what he has to say about this, because there was we've been focusing on the AfD, but the AfD weren't the only winners of the vote last weekend. There were other winners. Let's have a look at them and see perhaps what they are getting right.
He's authentic, down-to-earth and trustworthy. Baden-Württemberg's state premier Winfried Kretschmann, a member of the Green Party. The Greens support Chancellor Merkel's policy on refugees. Kretschmann seems to have struck a chord with the electorate.
The first priority is the country and its people. Everything else is secondary.
Kretschmann won his election. And she is authentic, down-to-earth, and trustworthy. Malu Dreyer, the Social Democrat state premier of Rhineland-Pfalz. She also supports the Chancellor's policy on refugees. And Dreyer refuses to take part in TV talk shows if the AfD is going to be there.
I stand by my position, and that is, no one should give the AfD a platform on TV. I will continue to stand by that position.
Dreyer won the vote in her state, too. In future German elections, will voters focus more on politicians and less on political parties?
Good question, Derek.
I think so. I mean, we're sort of realising this new branding of politics. It's not actually about the party programme, because people don't actually read them. Even journalists don't tend to read them. But I'm not too sure about this notion that they supported Merkel's migration policy, and therefore we've got these sort of
this has been the line that Judy has been touting, that
well,
80% of the German voters are in fact behind Angela Merkel, and only 20% maybe.
Well, people also went to vote on the state elections because they like this party's policy on schools and roads. I mean, let's not forget there were other issues, even if the migration policy, from our perspective in Berlin, dominated. But if you're in Rhineland-Palatinate and there's a problem with a bypass, you were voting for the party that would change that. But I do see this new branding of it's like these talent shows where you actually don't see anything that goes behind the talent. It's just the talent up front. But I do worry that the parties themselves are actually fading. I mean, the Social Democrats is a basket case. It has been for the last 10 years. What is social democracy? What is social justice? And 1 out of 3 winners does not make, for me, a successful election. And the Social Democrats is plunging. I mean, it's in crisis. And eventually they will have to decide, do we still stand on our own, or do we have to look to the left party? Because the Greens are going to go in with Chancellor Merkel's party in Baden-Württemberg, and that means Merkel has an option in 2017. The Social Democrats can either act now and define themselves and look to the left, or they'll be left standing on the dance floor in 2017. So this election has definitely shaken up the cards, and I do see this personalisation has come along. I do worry about the state of the parties then, if it's all about talent and faces and smiles and selfies.
Interesting analysis. I'd just like to ask the question, because Malu Dreyer, we had her there saying that she wouldn't go on a television talk show with representatives of the Alternative for Germany. Is that the right approach? Should we be talking to them or not talking to them?
I've always said, when you have me on this show, that there's no point in being on the outside and keeping the opposition, being on the inside and keeping the opposition, which have been democratically elected, on the outside. You have to engage. These are not demons. There are many decent people who voted for the AfD, and the public, it's a democratic right that actually we engage and we find out what do they really think? Why do they think like this? What are their fears? Who do they vote for? Why are they like this? What's wrong with the established parties? And putting them outside actually gives them more fodder, more ammunition to actually say, this is the established parties. They don't want to hear that we have an opinion, even though we went through the ballot box.
Yeah. Let's not forget Merkel for the last 3 years has said, I don't even acknowledge their existence. So I think for the first 2 years, she didn't even mention their name because her approach was alternativlos. There is no alternative to what I'm doing. That's not democracy.
This is patently
That's
absurd.
actually where the name comes from.
Of course,
Alternative for Germany.
It was a response to this line of argument from Angela Merkel, yeah? And they started off with 4.7 of the vote in the federal election 2013, 7.1% European elections, gaining ground in state elections now 12, 15 and 24. It's an upward curve. And I'm surprised again. I come back to the point I'm not sure that I understand why you guys are not more worried.
First of all, I would strongly dispute the notion that since 80% not voted for the AfD means they support the refugee policy. I think every polls, the pre-election polls and the after-election polls, shows that half of Germany is at least skeptical towards the policy. And not voting for a party doesn't mean you support the implied ideology of all the other parties. So I think the potential of the AfD is much higher than 15 or even 20%. But the result shows as well that even people who are skeptical or who are even against the refugee policy didn't vote for the AfD is a good sign, because they regard the party still as an extremist. Some parts of it are even racist orientated parties. So that's why I'm not so much afraid about the democratic culture or the behavior of the German electorate towards the party.
Yeah, and let's not forget, I mean, this is a party which, as Judy says, has some good people in it. There are people who used to vote for the CDU. When they voted for the CDU, they were good people, and now they're voting for the AfD, they're evil. I mean, there is an issue in Germany that I've seen it with the rise of Pegida. Some political scientists have said there's a problem in Germany that everything right of centre is considered the devil's work, or potentially the devil's work. They're in the waiting room for hell. And that's not the case, and that actually creates the momentum for a party like the AfD. Well, if they think I'm a bad boy, I'm going to show them how bad I am. I'm going to give the AfD
That's
my
interesting, because, I mean, there was effectively in Germany for a long time a taboo on voting for parties in this area, in this range of the political spectrum. Now I sense that taboo no longer applies. I mean, it can't apply if 24% of the population are voting for the party.
But it will probably continue. I know these parties, these fringe parties, have imploded through disorganisation. And as you say, it's a question of being re-elected. But I go back to what I said originally. This crisis is something special. It's new, it touches everybody, and it won't go away. And so this is the fear that the AfD will be able to tap into, and I would worry about this, but it's the fear that Chancellor Merkel and the established parties have to recognise. How are we going to cope on a German level and on a European level? And neither have the answers.
I think the answer would very strongly be it depends on how you deal with the party and how openly you're addressing the fears, the arguments and everything else like that. So it has to do with Peter Craven, and I think the first question was towards the German past. Or what role does it have in all the sort of discussion? And I think that's the combination between the European policy and the refugee policy. Both have connections to the German past. The European policy was always overshadowed because of our past. We have to be pro-Europeans, not an open European debate. And it was in the beginning as well, the emotions with the refugee crisis. Because of our past, we have to open our hearts for everything who is now under pressure from war and oppression.
I'm also quite optimistic. I know you're concerned, but I'm actually saying hysteria is not a policy, but it has been in Germany for the last 50 years. If anything happens that you're not happy with, you just go nuts. And the AfD has just turned that on its head and said, no, actually, we're not going nuts, you're getting nuts. What are you so annoyed about? And they're actually, that's quite clever. I mean, from a political strategic perspective, of course, there are lots of problematic people in there who just get nuts about everything. And there are lots of racists in there. But they've been using provocation to get attention. They have our attention.
We have to recapitulate. We're getting close to the end of the programme. Derek, I'd like to begin by asking you, is this an earthquake in German politics, or is this a blip?
Yes, it's an earthquake, and about bloody time. 10 years of Merkel and 8 years of Grand Coalition have been lethal for German party politics, and it's about time people were shaken awake. Cold shower does nobody any harm.
Judy, what do you say? Is Angela Merkel to blame for the fragmentation of German politics that we are seeing, I think, and the beginning of a major surge to the right in German politics?
She's only partly to blame, but the other EU member states are to blame as well. Europe comes out very, very badly on this, and putting all the blame on Angela Merkel's shoulders is passing the buck.
We're not going to put all the blame on Angela Merkel's shoulders. Malte Lemming, Angela Merkel is the great survivor. I think everybody would agree on that. Yeah, everybody is nodding, yeah? We've got the next federal election is coming up in 2017. Is Angela Merkel going to be German Chancellor after that election?
That's a very good question. I think she will, because I don't see any alternative, neither in her own party nor on the left side, forming a viable coalition, a left-wing coalition. I just can't see that.
And after your outpouring of bile about Angela Merkel, is she going to survive, Derek? Is she going to win the next election, 2017?
Survival is what she does, but nothing lasts forever, as we all know from the legend of Margaret Thatcher.
OK, we've heard a lot of predictions for the future here from all three of you. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of all that. If you've enjoyed the show as much as I have, do come back to Quadriga next week. Bye-bye for now.